All right. Welcome, everyone. As we enter 2021 in a tumultuous time, in a global pandemic, we could all use some good news. And today, we have some good news for you. Back in 2018, as the mayor of Oakland, I approached the San Francisco Foundation to create what I could clearly see was missing from our continuum of care to end homelessness, and that was to prevent it in the first place. In 2018, we had modest goals to try and keep a few hundred people per year from losing the housing they had. Little did we dream what a phenomenal impact Keep Oakland Housed would have. Today, we are excited to present a study that we believe will have regional, state, and national impact. In its last 2 years, Keep Oakland Housed has prevented nearly 5,000 households from being displaced, losing their housing, or falling into homelessness. In fact, it was 4,931 households to be exact. National studies validate that it costs $100,000 a year for someone to remain in homelessness. On average, Keep Oakland Housed demonstrates that for less than $5,000 a person, you can address their housing emergency, which is financial. You can give them the legal assistance they need, and you can give them the support, the case management to stabilize their income, stabilize their lives, and keep them in a position of self-sufficiency. This is the most efficient and humane investment that government can make. Again, 5,000 households in the last 2 years did not become homeless or lose their housing because of the incredible partnership of Keep Oakland Housed. Now, we do not want to keep these inspirational results to ourselves. We want the data that we've collected from Keep Oakland Housed to inspire broader action. Our amazing partners, and you're going to hear from many of them soon, have really created a roadmap to prevent homelessness. And that should be our highest goal. No one should have to suffer the indignity, the inhumanity, and the health risk of sleeping outdoors or in their cars or in boxes under our freeways. We know what a moral outrage this is. And the most efficient and effective way to begin reducing homelessness is to prevent anyone from having to experience it in the first place. We have created this roadmap with our most amazing practitioners here in Oakland, and we are ready to use those lessons to build a regional demonstration under the leadership of All Home. So I am proud that when Oakland began an emergency rental assistance program to address the impacts of COVID with our CARES Act dollars, we had this incredible partnership already established that was ready to just take those funds and not only ensure that they were effectively used, but that they reached the most vulnerable. People that often don't know how to navigate public services or legal aid organizations. That is truly one of the best accomplishments of Keep Oakland Housed. This public-private partnership has helped tenants to pay rent and other expenses that were putting their housing at risk. So we want to not just share this great news of the 5,000 households that maintained their housing and did not fall into homelessness thanks to Keep Oakland Housed. We want to issue today a call to action. We call on our state leaders to extend the statewide eviction moratorium by passing AB 15 before January 31st. We know that the eviction moratorium has kept thousands, possibly millions of Californians from contracting COVID. It is a health intervention, not just an economic and frankly moral intervention. We know that AB 16 is another critical piece, and to pass into law early before the typical budget process. The golden relief package proposed by Governor Newsom to keep Californians with cash in their pockets, that is another thing we call on everyone to advocate for. And of course, on January 20th, we will have a new federal partner in the Biden-Harris administration. They've demonstrated they actually care about housing and homelessness. They actually care about how the pandemic has disproportionately ravaged Black and brown communities. The federal stimulus package that was just announced yesterday would put desperately needed cash in the hands of our most struggling. It would provide more rent relief, and it would allow this public-private partnership, Keep Oakland Housed, to go to work immediately in stabilizing our beloved community. And that is why Keep Oakland Housed is the roadmap that shows we can keep everyone housed. With that, I am very excited to introduce one of the most inspirational leaders that I have the pleasure of working with. BACS, Bay Area Community Services, is our premier homelessness provider, and they are the architects of an approach that doesn't just stabilize people who are tenants with leaseholds that are facing evictions, but actually has identified those who are most at risk of imminent homelessness and keeps them housed. Jamie Almanza, the Executive Director of BACS.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I just want to thank you for seeing this as a missing part in our system over 2 years ago and galvanizing all of us in our community to actually think about prevention. I also want to thank our impassioned funders who I know are participating today, our donors, the partners of the collaborative, and our community. This is really a neighborhood program for the neighborhoods, by the neighborhoods, and so I just want to start by saying thank you. What I would like to share is a little story about when COVID hit and what happened with us as Keep Oakland Housed as a collaborative. I think it's safe to say when COVID hit, we didn't know how deep the ravaging of our communities would be, but the Keep Oakland Housed collaborative got around a table very early on, a virtual table. And we really looked at how we could very quickly change the criteria for Keep Oakland Housed to ensure that people, as we know, would be losing their jobs. Every single one of us knows someone who has lost their job, who has fallen ill to COVID. And we as a collaborative said we need to very quickly change and be able to get even more resources to the streets that much more quickly. And as the mayor shared, we also said, well, hey, there are so many people through research and data who actually do not hold a lease. And those are the individuals and families who are much closer to the front door of falling into homelessness. And so once again, the Keep Oakland Housed Collaborative really stepped forward and said, we are going to help those individuals and families before they fall into street homelessness. We know when there's a shock to the system, whether it's unemployment, whether it's a physical illness, those are the individuals and families that fall into homelessness. And so Keep Oakland Housed during COVID really changed its game. And as the mayor said too, we were very modest in how many people we thought we would serve early on into the design of Keep Oakland Housed. And we actually had started with 500 households as a goal. We have served over 5,000 or right at 5,000 households. And so 10% it was our goal, and we really stepped up to the charge. That means that many people are not living outside in the streets of Oakland because of this important prevention model. We have gotten $9 million in financial assistance to the homes and to the people that we are all surrounded by in our neighborhoods. And the most special part of what I would like to share today is an introduction to a gentleman and his daughter, who you're going to see a lovely video snapshot of a real participant, a real family that Keep Oakland Housed had the very extreme privilege to serve during COVID. And so I would like to introduce Marquise. He is a wonderful kind of explanation and shares just how special the Keep Oakland Housed initiative is. So without further ado.
I'm a native of Oakland. I've been in Oakland for 31 years. I was born in Highland, 89, earthquake baby. So I'm a native of Oakland. I'm 31 years old. I'm a musician overall, that's what I do. But the most proud thing that I am, I'm a father of a beautiful, beautiful baby girl. Was working and lost my job during the pandemic. It just seemed like from there I could not find a job. It was just back and forth, pillow couching from here, pillow couching from there. You doing this? I'm sleeping in my car a couple of times. I had to go through the struggle. We reached out, and I definitely have to say, wasn't even a month. It didn't even take you guys a month. And I mean, that was the professional side to it. Keeping Oakland housed is definitely very important because I myself wouldn't be housed without you guys. I live in a 2-bedroom now because of you guys helping me. My daughter has a beautiful bedroom. I have my own room. It's definitely peaceful. Having stability is definitely a peace of mind, knowing that my daughter is okay and that we have a place to call home.
You can just see how special the touch is of this beautiful program, and Marquise and his baby girl are living inside. And so you can also see how simple that step is to go from having to make a choice. And so the Keep Oakland Housed Collaborative really wanted to share that video. I am going to next also get the privilege of introducing a dear colleague who is part of our collaborative, Zoe Polk from East Bay Community Law Center. She's the executive director, and she's going to share what it means around public policy in our collaborative. So Zoe.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for sharing that video. Thank you so much, Mayor Schaaf, for your partnership. I would be remiss if I didn't start my remarks by recognizing that today is Dr. Martin Luther King's 92nd birthday. And I've been thinking about Dr. King and thinking about a lot of the words that inspire me and certainly thinking about the moment we're in. One of the things that's coming to mind, one of the quotes from him that comes to mind is, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." In the face of COVID-19, we at the Keep Oakland Housed Collaborative did not lose hope. While this virus set out on a devastating rampage in our communities, Keep Oakland Housed mobilized alongside other housing advocates and created the longest, strongest eviction moratorium in the country, preventing the mass eviction of primarily Black and Brown Oaklanders and exacerbating the public health crisis. I must underscore that the eviction moratorium here set the tone for subsequent state eviction moratoriums and the CDC federal moratorium, which occurred 6 months later. So what we did here in Oakland had national impact and literally saved millions of lives nationwide. Advocates then turned their attention to the state here in California, and we helped pass the AB 3088, which was critical statewide legislation to help keep 16 million Californian renters housed and able to safely shelter in place. The KOH Collaborative stands ready to work with all home and our state partners to fight for the changes that we must make at the county, state, and federal levels to ensure that people remain housed. It is often said that people derive their wealth from their homes. The reality is, particularly for Black and Indigenous communities, is that people derive their health from their homes. And the East Bay Community Law Center is so honored to be a part of this collaborative to keep Oaklanders housed and healthy. And with that, I want to introduce the third nonprofit that is part of the Keep Oakland Housed Collaborative, and that is Christopher Martinez, who is the Chief Program Officer at Catholic Charities East Bay.
Thank you so much, Zoe. And really, Catholic Charities is also very proud to be part of this collaborative. I think that, when you say the name Keep Oakland Housed, that's quite, a top bar to reach. And I think we've done an amazing job over the last 3 years, but our work is not done. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the equity and outreach that Keep Oakland Housed does. Keep Oakland Housed approaches prevention work with a racial equity lens. During the first 2 years, nearly 2/3 of program participants have been Black, which reflects the disproportionate rate of housing insecurity experienced by the city's Black residents. And similar to housing insecurity, as the mayor reminded us earlier, COVID-19 has had a greater impact on Black and Brown communities. But with new donations of $1.5 million, coupled with the strategic approach that the city of Oakland applied to the use of CARES Act funding, that's helped us to do more. We were able to expand Keep Oakland Housed in neighborhoods that are most vulnerable to homelessness and with the highest rates of COVID-19 to ensure that Black, Asian, and Latinx residents could continue to access these services. Therefore, Keep Oakland Housed grew partnerships to include the East Bay Asian Local Development Corporation, Roots Community Health Center, and the Unity Council. Now, this increased the support sorely needed by our residents in the Fruitvale, Chinatown, and Deep East Oakland through satellite campuses where people could access help directly from Keep Oakland Housed in their neighborhoods, enabling us all working together to ensure that we were responding to the areas with the greatest needs and addressing the needs of those most likely to experience homelessness. So with that, lastly, I would like to hand over the mic to Fred Blackwell, CEO of the San Francisco Foundation, which helps it fund and administer Keep Oakland Housed. Fred.
Thank you, Christopher, and thank you, Mayor, for all of your leadership on this and other important housing initiatives in the city of Oakland and beyond, and to the partners for their amazing work. I'm not going to take a whole lot of time. Everybody has really already laid out all of the compelling reasons why this works and why it's important to be supported. But I did want to close by just reiterating some of the things that you heard. First is that Keep Oakland Housed works. It works because we know that it is infinitely easier, less complicated, less expensive, and more humane to keep someone in their home than to try to respond to the individuals or families once they have become homeless. We know that, and because we know that, we have really put our shoulder to the wheel to put this into action. It also works, though, because just like all other things that we do, it works best when we work together. This is a very deep and authentic partnership between nonprofits, the corporate sector, the public sector, and philanthropy. And we know that we all do better when we bring all that we have to offer to a program like this. And so I just wanted to reiterate that first point. This works. And because it works, it deserves support. I really want to appreciate the donors at the San Francisco Foundation, the Crank Start Foundation, Kaiser, others who have committed to support this program, the City of Oakland, CARES Act funding. But we know that we will continue to need that kind of support to move this program forward. We know that this has been particularly important in terms of responding to the moment that is COVID, but we know that we had a homeless problem before COVID. We know that we will have one after COVID. And so this is something that deserves support, not just in this moment, but deserves long-term support. And there are plenty of seats at the table for those who are in the public sector or the private sector who wish to support this program and be a part of something that we know works. Last point, because it works and because it deserves support and because this is a long-term strategy, we need local government, we need state government, and we need federal government to export this to other jurisdictions and to take it to scale here in the state of California and probably even nationwide. The mayor referred to a variety of things that need to happen at the state level. there are things that local jurisdictions can do as well to take this on. And we think that it deserves that level of support. And so it works, it deserves support, it needs to be expanded, it needs to be taken to scale. I really want to thank everybody for all the hard work that has gone into this. I really want to appreciate the leadership of the mayor's office and the donors who supported this, the folks on the ground who've worked on it, and the residents of Oakland, frankly, who have persevered through really tough times as it comes to homelessness and housing. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to Nora to moderate question and answer, and we look forward to answer any questions that you all may have.
If anybody has any questions, please just put your name in the chat and I will call on outlets and individuals one by one.
This stunned silence from the press corps. Like I said, everyone needed some good news. Our moderator is muted.
Our first is going to be Michelle with the Catholic Voice.
Hi, thanks so much. This is really good news. Keeping people housed is so important and it should be done on a national scale. My question to you is what are your plans when the moratorium on rents expires? It seems that is going to be a time of great need. Is there a plan in place for addressing that moment?
Can I jump in on Oakland and then someone else can talk about more broadly? I should have clarified that while we are in passionate support of AB 15, I believe it is, to extend the eviction moratorium in California, Oakland has a stronger eviction moratorium. And under Oakland's laws, our eviction moratorium will remain in place as long as the Oakland City Council, in its authority, declares there to be a health emergency in Oakland. So I just want to make sure Oaklanders know that your eviction moratorium is not in question. It does not currently have any expiration date. But this is where we have to have the leadership of the federal government. And January 20th cannot come soon enough. To have an administration that cares about housing security and homelessness, that is dedicated to working out a package of rent relief, is a critical piece of everyone's security and peace of mind, because they are the only level of government that has the resources necessary to actually address this crisis. Now, I commend Governor Newsom for his budget announcements, and we urge the state legislature to fast track adoption of those relief bills. But at the end of the day, this will require federal aid. Now, I would invite our practitioners who are on the ground. I don't need to tell Oaklanders that homelessness was a crisis before COVID happened. And even during COVID, we've been able, through Project Room Key, to shelter, to get off of our streets more than 2,000 of our most vulnerable homeless. And yet, when we look at our streets, we see the problem has gotten worse, even with the eviction moratorium. This should be sounding the loudest alarm bells with every elected official, anyone who considers them any type of leader should have this at the top of their priority list. But I will invite other practitioners to weigh in on that. I've referred to this as homelessness Armageddon. If very dramatic and courageous action is not taken at the federal level.
Thank you, Mayor Schaaf. I, unequivocally agree. At the East Bay Community Law Center, we do eviction defense. That is, our attorneys are in court representing people. And up until March 15th, we were dealing with about 30 to 100 evictions per week in the courts. And so the thought of the eviction moratorium lifting during a time we are still in an urgent public health crisis is certainly untenable for us. And the main thing, as the mayor said, the main thing that is needed is there needs to be real rental forgiveness, and there needs real assistance to people. And absolutely, the eviction moratorium, evictions cannot be allowed to move forward until those things are in place. Otherwise, we are looking at a devastating impact that will continue to ravage and disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities, people without generational wealth, who have to pay what little wealth that they have to pay to their landlords to pay rent to stay sheltered in place. So we absolutely can't be looking at a situation in which the eviction moratorium is lifted without real rent forgiveness and assistance for our tenants.
And maybe I'll hop in as well. Good morning, everyone. Tamika Moss from All Home. In addition to what the mayor and Zoe just lifted up, I wanted to also share that the federal leadership is already beginning to recognize through our fervent advocacy that rental assistance is critically important to this intervention. And so we want to make sure that local and county and state and jurisdictions across the entire Bay Area and across the state are able to receive those dollars, get them out the door to the people who are most in need of those supports. And Keep Oakland Housed is an exceptional program to be able to facilitate that work. And we want to be able to scale it and to support the providers who are going to be receiving millions of dollars very quickly that need to go out the door. And we need the infrastructure and support for our organizations to get them the resources in the hands of the people who most need them. And I also would be remiss not to say that in addition to rental debt relief, we also need to be paying attention to our small property owners, people whose livelihoods depend on being able to retain their properties through this crisis as well. Homeowners who use their properties as income, seniors, et cetera, to ensure that they are supported through this pandemic as well. So rent relief is critically important. We also need to make sure that we have support for our small landlords across the state and the region to ensure that they are able to continue to provide income and resource for their families.
Thank you so much. And our next question is coming from Marissa Kendall with the East Bay Times.
Hi, thanks. So I know there's so much need out there. I was just wondering how the nearly 5,000 households that this program has served so far compares to the number of applicants. Are you able to serve every single person who applies for this funding, or how many folks are you forced to turn away?
Yeah, I can take that. That's such a great question. We developed infrastructure early on to really track all applications. And we also developed really a nationally validated tool that really helps us target those individuals and families that have the highest likelihood of falling into homelessness. We have been extraordinarily fortunate within Keep Oakland Housed with the philanthropic investment, and then also with the federal CARES investment that the city of Oakland so courageously kind of shepherded and took through the Keep Oakland Housed program, that we have not had to turn away applicants who didn't qualify for the program. And we also, in our infrastructure build out, those 5,000 households, we know who they are, and we have also given the message that, sometimes crisis, or many times crisis, is not a one-time thing, that they also are able to reach back out to Keep Oakland Housed, and we too interact with them to ensure that if a crisis pops up again, just as Zoe's saying, with the crisis in front of us, that we are able to continue to serve those households.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, that was why it was so important for us to push for the eviction moratorium. As of March 15th, when the universities and banks and a lot of corporations were shutting down, it wasn't a given that the courts were shutting down. And that's why we really kicked it into gear to say that the courts had to stop evicting people. That was the way that to present a massive health crisis. And so from our standpoint, because we got that eviction moratorium in place and had to keep pushing for it to be extended, and we continue to do that, we weren't in a position where we had to turn away hundreds of people who would be coming to us because they were due for a court appearance in which the shelter that they were supposed to be in place was going to be taken away from them. So that was just why that was a key point of when we knew the reality of COVID was coming, that it was a key for us to push for the eviction moratorium so that we would not be in a place where we have to turn people away. And we are now in a place where, there are a few evictions happening, but they're much smaller. And they're much smaller based on there's a health and safety exception. But so we are able to manage those at a much, at the scale that is very different than if the eviction moratorium was not in place.
I wonder if I could also just add that, in terms of rental assistance, there's so much need out there post-COVID, and the need is so significant. And yet rental assistance is typically not tied to homelessness prevention. And so part of what we need to do is really expand our thinking to ensure we want to be as responsive as we can to folks who are at higher incomes, who have lost their jobs during COVID. They are struggling. We recognize that to be true. And as Mayor Schaaf talked about very early on, it is critically important for us to target these resources to the people who are most at risk of homelessness, because we know that if we are able to stabilize those households and those communities, we're going to be able to reduce the number of people who are falling into homelessness. So I want to be clear that both are necessary, and we recognize how many of our folks are struggling. But the data also informs us that 40% of the people who lost their jobs through COVID were extremely low income households. And those are the households who are most at risk of falling into homelessness when there's this kind of economic crisis.
And Marissa, you were with me just a few days ago at our AB 71 press conference, and All Home is part of that Bring California Home coalition. You'll see many of these advocates as part of that coalition, just to lift up the lessons learned and the influence that Keep Oakland Housed is having on the overall policy discussion. The reason that I lifted up that AB 71 was one of the most inspirational proposals I had seen was that not only was it permanent sustained funding at scale, but it recognizes that we have to invest in prevention, like what Keep Oakland Housed is doing, in the long-term financial health of that individual through ensuring that they thrive, that we are sustaining their housing security through job training and income support. The AB 71 actually caps the amount of money that can be spent on shelter, because we recognize that the far more effective and efficient investments are prevention and permanently affordable housing, as well as ensuring that people's incomes are maintained at a level that allows them to thrive. So that is all baked into AB 71 as well.
Great, just another call for questions. If you do have a question, please put your name or outlet in the chat and I will call on you.
think this is the opportunity to just end this, to thank everybody. These courageous individuals that work in these organizations, our nonprofit community, we could not be more blessed to have more compassionate or effective prevention professionals, advocates, and we are building this as a movement. I also have got to recognize Crank Start, who has been there with us from the beginning, obviously in addition to San Francisco Foundation and Kaiser Permanente, that made the seed investment that made this possible. This public-private partnership, this investment to demonstrate what is possible, so that now we in government can take these lessons, this model that has been perfected through these heroes that have been out on the streets, keeping people housed. We thank you so much for believing in this partnership, investing in it. And now it is our job as the leaders of the public sector to make sure that this is not some one-time charitable investment, but this is how we do business as a society. So thank you, everyone. Have a safe rest of your day. Have a great weekend. And next week, we are welcoming a whole new federal government. I know that that gives me tremendous hope. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to all our wonderful partners.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and to Mayor Schaaf for closing. We'll be sending out the press release and the new report shortly. If you have any questions, I've put the email to follow up with in the chat.
Great. Thanks.